The crystalline chamber gleamed with cold light as Emperor Vextherin lay upon the obsidian platform, his massive form barely moving. His scales, once brilliant gold and crimson, had dulled to the color of ash. Each breath came with effort, rattling through his chest like stones grinding together. High Physician Saelrix stood beside him, her smaller dragon form bowed in defeat. My Emperor, the crystallization has spread to 70% of your heart. Perhaps if we attempt the stasis procedure. No more. Vextherin's voice rumbled, weaker than it had been in 8 centuries. I have lived long enough. The physician's tail twitched with distress. But Majesty, the Empire needs you. Without your guidance. The Empire survived before me. It will survive after. The Emperor closed his eyes, feeling the sharp pain in his chest intensify. His heart, the magnificent biomechanical organ that had sustained him through 847 years, was dying. The organic crystal that powered it was turning against itself, hardening, choking out the energy that kept him alive. He had seen this coming for months. First the fatigue, then the dimming of his inner fire. Now he could barely lift his head without exhaustion crashing over him like waves. Outside his chamber, the Imperial Council gathered in urgent whispers. Vextherin could hear them even through the thick walls. They were not mourning. They were planning. Dividing his empire like scavengers around a corpse that still drew breath. Let them, he thought bitterly. Perhaps I held on too long anyway. He had ruled through 3 major wars, brought peace to 70 star systems, and established trade routes that connected hundreds of worlds. He had been father to his people, protector of the weak and enforcer of justice. But he was tired. So deeply tired. The doors hissed open. Minister Thalkar entered, his purple scales gleaming with ambition poorly hidden. My Emperor, there is a matter requiring your attention. Unless the stars themselves are falling, I do not care. A human vessel, Majesty. Damaged in the outer mining region. They request asylum and repairs. Vextherin's eyes remained closed. Humans. The young species that had burst onto the galactic stage only 2 centuries ago. Loud, chaotic, and frustratingly persistent. Standard protocols. Provide minimal assistance and send them away. The Council suggests we ignore them entirely. Resources are better spent elsewhere during this transitional period. The Emperor's eyes snapped open, still holding a flicker of the fire that once commanded fleets. Transitional period? I still breathe, Thalkar. The minister stepped back. Of course, Majesty. I meant no. Send rescue ships. Bring the survivors to the orbital station. Give them what they need. Vextherin's breathing grew labored. I will not have it said that the Kaldrith Empire turned its back on those in need. Not while I yet live. As you command. Thalkar bowed and left, irritation evident in the stiffness of his movements. Alone again, Vextherin felt the pain surge through his chest. The physician said he had weeks, perhaps days. The crystallization could not be stopped. It was simply the end of his time. He thought of his mate, dead these past 200 years. He thought of his children lost to war and time. He thought of the endless responsibilities, the decisions that weighed on him like mountains. Perhaps death would be a relief. High Physician Saelrix returned with another dose of pain medication. The human ship has been recovered. 6 survivors. They will be processed and released within 3 days. Good. The Emperor's voice was fading. See that they are treated well. As the medication pulled him toward sleep, Vextherin's last thought was simple and sad. He had given everything to his empire. He had nothing left to give. It was time to let go. He did not know that among those 6 human survivors was a mechanic with grease under her fingernails and a stubbornness that would change everything. Joanna Chin stood in the Imperial Reception Hall with her arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed. Around her, the other human survivors from the freighter knelt on the polished floor, their heads bowed low as protocol demanded. Jo remained standing, her worn boots squeaking against the pristine surface. You are supposed to kneel, hissed Marcus, her co-pilot, from his position on the floor. My knees don't work that way anymore. Mining accident on Titan. Jo shifted her weight, examining the towering pillars that reached toward the domed ceiling. Besides, we're being rescued, not arrested. I'll say thanks, but I'm not bowing to anyone. The Kaldrith guards exchanged uncertain glances. Their protocol manuals had not prepared them for humans who simply refused to follow basic courtesy. Minister Thalkar entered, his purple scales catching the light. He looked at the kneeling humans with approval, then his eyes landed on Jo. His expression darkened. You. On your knees. Now. Can't. Bad knees. Also bad attitude. Joe met his glare without flinching. Look, we appreciate the rescue. Our ship got clipped by an asteroid and we would have died out there. So thanks. When can we get our repairs and leave? Thalkar's tail lashed behind him. You dare address me with such disrespect? I dare address you like a person talking to another person. Is that weird here? Before the minister could respond, a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. Emperor Vex Theron had entered, moving slowly, his breathing labored. Even diminished by illness, he was massive, easily 3 times the height of any human. His scales still held traces of former glory. The kneeling humans pressed their faces to the floor. Joe simply turned to look at him. You don't bow either, Vex Theron observed, his voice carrying across the hall despite its weakness. Bad knees, your majesty. Mining accident. Joe gestured at her legs. But I do appreciate you sending ships for us. We'd be dead otherwise. Thank you. A strange sound emerged from the Emperor's throat. It took Joe a moment to realize he was laughing. How refreshing. What is your name, human? Joanna Chin. Most people call me Joe. I'm the mechanic on the freighter Destiny's Wrench. A mechanic. Vex Theron moved closer, studying her with ancient eyes. Tell me, Joe the mechanic, how do you find our rescue operations? Honestly? Your people did a decent job getting us out, but whoever patched my ship's engine has no idea what they're doing. The plasma coupling is reversed and the coolant lines are going to burst within a day. Minister Thalkar sputtered. How dare you criticize Imperial engineers? But the Emperor raised one massive claw for silence. You can fix it better? In my sleep. Look, I've been working on biosynthetic engines since I was 12. Human colony ships use similar tech to your stuff, just smaller and meaner. Give me 6 hours and proper tools, I'll have that engine purring. Interesting. Vex Theron's breathing grew heavier. The effort of standing was clearly taxing him. You may remain in the palace while repairs are completed. Consider it compensation for our engineers' inadequacy. Works for me. Better food here anyway. Over the next 2 days, Joe wandered the palace with the casual disregard of someone who had never learned proper fear of authority. She explored workshops, examined technology, and annoyed at least a dozen officials with her constant questions. On the 3rd day, she found herself in a restricted archive, poring over technical schematics displayed on a holographic screen. The designs showed something labeled Imperial Heart Mark 7, with detailed biological and mechanical components. Joe's eyes widened as she traced the energy flow patterns. She recognized the cascade failure immediately. The crystallization wasn't medical, it was an engineering problem. A stupid, fixable engineering problem. This is why he's dying, she muttered, zooming in on the regulatory matrix. Any first-year student could spot this design flaw. She spent the next 4 hours running calculations, checking her work 3 times. By dawn she was certain. And furious. Joe marched straight to the throne room, pushing past startled guards. Emperor Vex Theron looked up from his platform, surprised to see the small human storming toward him. You're dying from the stupidest engineering failure I've ever seen, Joe announced, pointing at him. And I can fix it. Emperor Vex Theron stared at the small human standing before his throne, her grease-stained hands planted firmly on her hips. You can fix what the finest physicians in the Empire cannot? Your physicians are treating it like a disease. It's not. It's a mechanical cascade failure in your heart's regulatory matrix. Joe pulled out a data pad, projecting the schematics into the air. See this? The crystal growth isn't random. It's happening because the bioelectric feedback loop is stuck in a positive cycle. It keeps reinforcing itself until everything crystallizes. High Physician Sailrix entered the chamber, her expression outraged. This human has accessed restricted medical files. Because nobody else was looking at the actual problem, Joe shot back. You're trying to treat symptoms. I'm looking at the cause. Vex Theron leaned forward despite the pain it caused. Explain it simply. Your heart is like an engine that regulates itself. But the regulator broke. Now instead of maintaining balance, it's pushing everything toward crystallization. The more it crystallizes, the worse the feedback gets. It's a death spiral. And you can stop this? Joe hesitated. Maybe. The problem is you need a compatible bioresonance pattern to reboot the system. Something different enough to break the cycle but compatible enough to sync with your biology. We have tested every Caldrith donor in the Empire, Sailrix said coldly. None match. That's because you're all too similar. You need something completely different. Joe took a breath. You need a human heart. Specifically, you need mine. The throne room fell silent. Impossible, Sailrix whispered. The biological incompatibility alone would normally kill both of us, yeah. But I'm not talking about a transplant. I'm talking about a hybrid system. We use organic components from my heart to create a biobridge. Your heart gets rebooted with my resonance pattern, and once it stabilizes, it should maintain itself. Vextheron's eyes narrowed. What would this cost you? Everything. Joe's voice was steady. The procedure would link our life forces permanently. Your heart and mine would be synchronized. If one of us dies, the other follows within days. Maybe hours. We'd be connected for life. Then the answer is no. The Emperor's voice was firm. I will not chain an innocent to my fate. Too bad because I'm volunteering. Why would you do this? Joe was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried an old pain. I grew up on Titan Colony during the separation wars. I was 8 when the fighting started. By the time I was 10, I was an orphan. I watched an entire colony tear itself apart because nobody could agree on who should lead. She pointed toward the palace windows, where the Empire's ships moved in perfect formation. I've been here 3 days. I've heard your council fighting. I've seen the factions forming. If you die, this empire goes to war with itself. Billions die. I can stop that. You would sacrifice your freedom for people you do not know? I'd sacrifice a lot more than freedom to prevent another war. Joe met his ancient gaze without fear. Besides, you don't get to just give up when billions are counting on you. That's not noble. That's cowardice. The word hung in the air like a blade. No one had called the Emperor a coward in living memory. Vextheron felt something stir in his chest. Not pain, but something he had not felt in years. Shame. And beneath it, a flicker of the fire that once drove him. You would bind yourself to a dying dragon out of stubbornness? I've been called worse things for worse reasons. Joe's expression softened slightly. Look, I'm not trying to insult you. But you've spent 847 years protecting people. You don't get to quit now just because you're tired. And I'm not letting you quit when I can help. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. This small, stubborn human with her broken knees and fierce eyes. She reminded him of why he had fought so hard for so long. Prepare the surgical chamber, Vextheron said quietly. We attempt this procedure. Joe nodded once. Good choice, Your Majesty. If we survive this, you are going to be insufferable. Probably. But you'll be alive to complain about it. The surgical chamber was unlike anything Joe had ever seen. Crystalline instruments floated in sterile fields while medical displays showed anatomical data in languages she barely understood. She lay on one platform while Emperor Vextheron occupied a much larger one beside her, their beds positioned so close that if she reached out, she could touch his massive claw. Are you frightened? The Emperor asked, his voice softer than she had heard before. Terrified, Joe admitted. But I've been terrified before. You just keep moving forward anyway. High Physician Sailrix and her team worked in focused silence. They had spent 48 hours preparing for a procedure that had never been attempted. Human and Caldrith biology were so different that the odds of success were barely calculable. Beginning extraction, Sailrix announced. The sedation pulled Joe under slowly. Her last conscious thought was the steady beep of her own heartbeat echoing through the chamber. 73 hours later, Joe woke to pain unlike anything she had experienced. It felt like her chest was being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously. She tried to scream but no sound came out. Then she felt it. Another heartbeat. Not her own. Slower, deeper, ancient. It pulsed alongside hers in a rhythm that should have been impossible. In the next chamber, Vextheron's eyes opened. The pain was immense, but beneath it was something else. Strength. His scales, dull for months, now gleamed with renewed color. But there were changes. Faint patterns rippled across his chest, almost like human skin texture, shimmering in the light. The procedure worked, Sailrix breathed, checking the monitors with disbelief. Both subjects are stable. The hybrid heart is functioning. Days passed in a haze of recovery. Joe and Vextheron remained in adjacent medical chambers, separated only by a transparent wall. They did not speak much at first. They did not need to. Joe could feel his emotions like distant echoes. A profound loneliness that had existed for centuries. The weight of responsibility that had crushed him slowly over time. Grief for those he had lost. Vextheron felt hers as well. The sharp pain of childhood trauma. The fierce determination that drove her forward. An unexpected kindness buried beneath her rough exterior. This is strange, Joe said on the 5th day, her voice still weak. Indeed. Vextheron turned his head to look at her through the transparent barrier. I can feel your sadness. I can feel yours too. It's heavy. Like drowning. She paused. I'm sorry you've carried that alone for so long. And I am sorry for what you endured as a child. They fell silent, bound by something neither had asked for but both now carried together. When the medical chambers finally opened, the Empire waited with mixed reactions. Some called it a miracle. Others called it an abomination. The news spread across every planet. The ancient dragon emperor had bonded his life to a human mechanic. Minister Thalkar stood before the recovered emperor, his expression twisted with barely concealed disgust. Majesty, the council requests an explanation. You have contaminated your pure bloodline with lesser species biology. Vextheron's eyes flashed with dangerous fire. Choose your next words carefully, Minister. Jo stepped forward, still unsteady on her feet. He means I'm the contamination. Real polite, considering I saved his emperor's life. You have bound our emperor to your short, pathetic human lifespan. 70 years is better than 70 days, which is what he had before. Jo's hands clenched into fists. And if you have a problem with what I am, you can take it up with my lawyers. Oh wait, I don't have lawyers. Guess you'll just have to deal with me. Vextheron made a sound that might have been a laugh. The human raises a valid point, Thalkar. Dismissed. Over the following weeks, Jo adjusted to her new reality. She could not leave the palace for long periods. The distance from Vextheron caused both of them physical pain. She was no longer just a mechanic. She was the heartbound, a living symbol of the Emperor's survival. She hated the politics. She hated the ceremonies. She hated the constant attention. But when she sat in the quiet garden with Vextheron in the evenings, feeling his ancient presence beside her and his steady heartbeat matching her own, she found she did not regret her choice. Still think I'm a coward? He asked one evening. Jo smiled despite herself. Ask me again tomorrow. 6 months had passed since the surgery, and the Kaldrith Empire had changed in ways no one expected. Emperor Vextheron stood before the Grand Council, his scales brilliant with renewed health, announcing reforms that would have been unthinkable before. All species under imperial protection will receive equal representation in regional governance, he declared. The taxation system will be restructured to favor developing colonies. And mining operations will be subject to worker safety standards regardless of species. The traditional council members sat in stunned silence. Beside the emperor's throne stood Jo, still wearing her grease-stained coveralls despite the formal occasion. Her arms crossed as she watched the politicians squirm. This is madness, Minister Thalkar hissed. The Empire has functioned for millennia under the current system. The Empire has exploited for millennia, Jo corrected. There's a difference. Vextheron felt the spike of her irritation through their bond and suppressed a smile. The human speaks truth. I have been blind to many injustices. That ends now. The changes came swiftly. Trade agreements were renegotiated fairly. Small species who had lived under Kaldrith dominance suddenly found their voices heard. Jo worked alongside the Emperor, cutting through bureaucratic nonsense with the same directness she applied to fixing engines. But not everyone welcomed the new order. In the shadows, a group of xenophobic nobles gathered. They called themselves the Pure Scale Movement and they wanted the old empire back. An empire ruled by Kaldrith alone, untainted by lesser species. The Emperor has been corrupted by human influence, their leader, General Krostak, growled to his conspirators. We must remove the source of contamination. If we kill the human, the Emperor dies too, one pointed out. Exactly. Then a true Kaldrith can rule again. They chose their moment carefully. During a state dinner celebrating the new trade agreements, a servant slipped poison into Jo's drink. It was a slow-acting toxin, designed to look like natural illness until it was too late. Jo felt the first symptoms an hour later. Dizziness. Nausea. Her heart began racing irregularly. Across the palace, Vextheron collapsed mid-sentence during a meeting. The same symptoms crashed over him like a wave. High Physician Saelrix worked frantically in the medical chamber where both now lay dying. It's a neural toxin, designed specifically to target humans. But because of the heart bond, it's affecting the Emperor as well. Can you stop it? Jo gasped, her vision blurring. Not in time. The poison is too advanced in your system. Vextheron felt his strength fading. His newly restored life slipping away. But more than his own death, he felt Jo's terror through their bond. She was only 35 years old. She had saved him and now she would die because of it. No, he rumbled, ancient power stirring in his voice. There is one way. He began speaking words in the old dragon tongue, words that had been forbidden for 3 centuries. Magic that the Cauldron had abandoned in favor of technology. His body glowed with golden light. Majesty, no. Xelrix cried. That spell will separate your life forces. She might survive, but you will certainly die. Then she survives. That is enough. Joe felt the bond beginning to loosen. She realized what he was doing. Stop. Don't you dare. You gave me 6 months I would not have had, Vex Theron said softly. You gave me purpose again. This is my choice. And this is mine. Joe forced herself upright despite the poison burning through her veins. Her mechanical knowledge kicked in even through the pain. The toxin was disrupting their synchronized bioelectric patterns. If she could just recalibrate. She grabbed medical tools with shaking hands, connecting herself and the Emperor to the diagnostic equipment. Xelrix, I need a biofilter now. That will kill you both. It's our only chance. Do it. Working together, they jury-rigged a desperate solution. Using Cauldron medical technology and Joe's understanding of biosynthetic systems, they created a filter to purge the poison from both bodies simultaneously. The pain was excruciating. Joe screamed. Vex Theron roared. Their shared heartbeat stuttered, stopped, then thundered back to life. When the filter finished its work, they lay gasping but alive. Stubborn human, Vex Theron wheezed. Stubborn dragon, Joe shot back. 3 days later, General Crosstack and his conspirators were arrested. The assassination attempt had failed, and the Empire's resolve for reform only strengthened. 5 years passed. The Cauldron Empire transformed into a true federation where dozens of species participated in governance. Joe still wore coveralls to state functions, still fixed things that broke, and still argued with politicians who wasted her time. On the anniversary of their bonding, she stood with Vex Theron on the palace balcony, watching ships from 100 worlds arrive for the Unity Summit. Do you regret it? The Emperor asked quietly. The life you gave up for this? Joe felt his heartbeat steady and strong beside her own. Every damn day. But I'd do it again. Vex Theron laughed, the sound carrying across the plaza below. His people looked up, smiling at the sound they had learned to cherish. Still think I'm a coward? He asked. Always. But you're my coward. And together, bound by a half-shared heart and an impossible choice, they watched their empire embrace a new future.